All right. I got the timeline started late because of technical difficulties. So, welcome to the show, everybody. This is Counter Living Stream number 124 for May 15th, 2023. Our topic tonight is the best of the Crimean War. I almost said Korean War, which would be another interesting topic, but not for this week. We are drinking. The bottle is not within easy reach. We are drinking Glenlivet 15. So, thank you, Scott, for this delightful gift. We are most of the way through that bottle, actually. Bottled at 40%, which is a little bit low, but I have actually found that some interesting flavor notes are brought out by adding a bit of water to it. So, before we get started, let me remind everybody to please do thumbs up the video. Please do like the video as well, and they're the same thing, actually. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. Let me put up the ticker because there's important information in it that we will need at some point during the show this evening. We are clipping Musket and Pike dual pack. Still, we've been picking away at this rather large game for quite a while. And I will mention that super chats and super stickers are on. Your support is appreciated, and that is a great way to get your comment highlighted so I don't miss it, because otherwise I might miss it because there's already 83 people here. And we are going to have trouble keeping up with everything. So let's say hello to Six Actual, Alan Salazar, Andrew Atkin, Bayonet Brant from the Armchair Dragoons, Brent McCabe, Cardboard Conflicts, Chad Kennedy, Colbieri, Krusty Captain, Ed Holtzman, Eric from Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles, Fast Hines, Half-Ass Gaming, the legend himself, Fucko is here, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Wesovich, Jeffrey Turner, Joel, Joe Mentum, John C. from the sunny Philippines. I hope that it is indeed sunny down there today, John. John Clark, Carl Crater from the Wargame Boot Camp. Kilroy is here. Lee Grant, Mark G, Meandering Mike, Paperless Writer, Paul Sin, Ray Garby, Richard D. Fortuna, Stacking Limit. Stigler is in the house. Stuka Joe is here. Joe, welcome. Thanks for coming by. Tom Borman, Tim Greenhaw, Todd Cox, Tony Mammal, and William Bird. So I don't know that I have any particularly newsworthy wargaming news, and it's very plausible that I have missed something. So I will defer that to a later time. But we do have an MMP production update on to Richmond. I don't have a graphic for this. On to Richmond 2 is the remaining pieces are at the printer. So we should be seeing on to Richmond 2 reasonably soon, and they're talking by the end of the month. So presumably those have been at the printer for a while, but they're also probably not waiting for every component. I believe they've had at least some of the components in house for a while now. So I'm super duper looking forward to that. I am stretched to my breaking point after Buckeye Game Fest. And of course, we have Origins coming up in June as well. And I believe this coming weekend, by the way, is the new May Compass Expo. There's some pretty cool stuff. Looks like it's happening there. I can't wait to see the pictures. There was no way I was going to be able to go to that, sandwiched as it is between Buckeye Game Fest and Origins. That was just not going to happen. So, but I'm sure it's going to be a fun event. There's some cool stuff happening there. Local buddy who is headed up there stopped by the other day and we chatted about it a wee bit. So there might be more news coming out of that conversation at some point, but not tonight. So Jason W is also excited about On to Richmond 2. And like I said, it sounds like it's pretty close. I think we're going to do the leaders separately. This is already a mess, man. This game is all in baggies so far. Pending 3D printed trays, which are not terribly close, to be honest. So, because there's just a lot of stuff on the printer right now. I keep getting distracted, but we will have new posts for, new 3D models for the month of June. Those are likely to be posted along with a message for patrons sometime in the last couple of days of May. So, Philip Musket, thanks for stopping by from sunny Gettysburg. Joe Okabayashi. David Zell, I don't think I got you yet. Cardboard Conflicts, I think I did hit you, but Charles Latoro, I just saying hello to you now. Welcome back to the stream. So once again, welcome everybody. What we are playing right now, we are continuing Last Blitzkrieg, and The more people you have in these face-to-face games, I guess before I talk about that, there is two giveaways tonight. So, courtesy of Mark Ruggiero. So stay tuned for that. I'll be giving one away before we get into tonight's topic, which is the best of the Crimean War. There's more games than maybe you think, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a total ton of them. A lot of miniatures games in that space. So anyway, we are continuing to play Last Blitzkrieg, and we're getting pretty close to wrapping it up. I think we've hit December 26th. And to be fair, we need to give the Americans a couple more turns at kicking us around because we spent plenty of turns kicking them around. Um, so we'll see how that develops, but it's pretty obvious that the Germans are not going to make much additional forward progress. So we're looking at wrapping that at some point, probably 2 to 3 weeks before Origins, so that we can set up a warm-up game of the Third World War. There are still seats available for the Compass Games, the Third World War. That's the classic Frank Chadwick design at Origins. And you are not committing to play the entire thing. You are committing to a 4-hour slot. And we will probably have room for walk-ins as well. There's going to be plenty to do on those maps. But it is a very good game series or system, and I'm looking forward to playing it again, even though it's not my personal favorite choice of topic. I was joking to Brant the other day that it was about the Narnians versus the elves. So there's that. And I don't do minis. So there aren't so I've taken out all the miniatures games in this discussion because I don't have anything to say about them. So I mean, nothing wrong with miniatures people playing whatever they want, but I don't have anything to say about miniatures games. So I am not your man for that. But there's, like I said, there's maybe more conventional tabletop board war games than maybe you think. So hopefully we will get to illuminate some people tonight on the topic. So what else is coming up next? We've all seen the Labatai stuff, so I'll mention that I have an interview scheduled for Thursday at 8 p.m. with Dennis Spores of Marshall Enterprises. So that is all set up and ready to go. In addition, we have the show with Dan tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. We are now on Eastern Daylight Time, so bear that in mind as well. And we have special guest Mitchell Land scheduled to be with us tomorrow night. And we're going to talk about wargame accessibility, but I'm sure we'll get into the Next War series as well, which is a very popular GMT series that a lot of people do like. So let's have a sip of delicious, delicious scotch. I've also been getting a lot of yard work done, but I'm not going to bore you with that conversation. So I'm a bit jealous of the golden geeks over at Board Game Geek because while I'm sure this is an entirely automated process, for all that entails, I'm jealous of how fast they were able to complete the entire process. Those have been announced, so I want to give a shout out and congratulations to the winners of games, or almost winners, in the wargaming space, which include David Thompson for Undaunted Stalingrad, Liz Davidson, who came in as a runner-up for her podcast, which is excellent, Beyond Solitaire, and Tori Brown, designer of Votes for Women. Not going to say anything more about that right now because we are in, the CSR process. So I'm unable to comment further at this time, but congratulations to Liz, David, and Tori. So, I have been sort of fiddling with Europa Universalis, The Price of Power. And I don't mean playing, I mean creating 3D printed storage solutions for at the moment. It is a big, long, space consuming game that I do hope to play. If somebody would like to see video on that from me, other than the non unboxing component overview that we're going to have on Wednesday, do let me know. And if you say it in the comments here, thank you, but I'll probably miss it. So email, or there's a million ways to get a hold of me. And in fact, there's just too many ways to get a hold of me because I'll get like a notification on the phone that says so and so says this, and then I'm looking through 16 different apps trying to figure out what exactly so and so is saying. That actually happened again today, and it's super annoying. So we got a whole bunch of stuff. Looks like Stigler's by Swords and Bayonets is up to 1050 pre-orders as of yesterday. One of those is mine. So congrats to Stigler. We'll get that thing out by 2026 or so, right, Stigler? Let's hope so. And we'll have Stigler on at some point to talk about the game when it's a little bit closer. So um let's do our first giveaway actually super duper early here. So let me share the screen. This is a subscription to War Diary magazine, courtesy of our good friend Mark Ruggiero, as thanks to the community for helping to support him and his wife in their struggle against cancer. And we have the hashtag War Diary. If you have already won one of these, do not enter this because I will yell at you. But if you do win, you will be required to email me at the email address in the ticker. That is ardwulfslair@gmail.com with your name, legal name, and address, and the name that's on the address. And I will get that information as speedily as this evening to the appropriate folks over to Mark. I'll let him know. And to the folks over at War Diary so they can get that working. So hashtag War Diary in the chat, please. We got 24 entries already. That's pretty good. So it is a terrific magazine if you haven't seen it. It doesn't normally come with a game. I'm not sure it's ever come with a game, although War Diary has published a couple of games now. But there are just as often as not, if you get the physical magazine, game accessories in it. And the article content is outstanding. So Mark, thanks for stopping by. Much appreciated. So, like I said, very good magazine. I'm happy to have it in the wargaming space. So, let's be glad I'm not boring you with technical discussions this evening. So, not even about my technical difficulties. I actually had to climb under the desk and unplug the webcam, and that didn't fix it. And I'm not sure what the problem was. And then I pulled it up in the Logitech app, and I'm like, it works fine. What's going on? And it looks like it was OBS that was the problem. There was an OBS update, so that probably broke it. But it was pretty annoying. John Stanley is correct. Please remember to hit that like button. Punch that like button. I got to come up with a tagline for that, I suppose. I have not yet done that. So we'll run this while I talk a little bit about the Crimean War, which is as a bunch of people have pointed out in the chat, there's not that many games about the Crimean War. And if I call it the Korean War, then oops, I won't have meant to do that. And we're not talking about the Korean War tonight. But like I said, that actually is a pretty good idea of a topic. And it's nice to cover these topics that maybe are a little thinner on the ground than our typical, World War II and modern type of stuff. We'll keep it like that. So 64 entries, folks. We'd like to get up to at least 75. Clip that like button by Brian Jarvis. That's pretty good. That is pretty good. And I know Mo's got some War Diary. Mo from Mo's Game Table has some War Diary subscriptions to give away too. I'm not sure if he's done that already yet or not. I have not had a chance to catch a lot of video lately, unless I've managed to listen to it while doing yard work, which is a thing that's been there's a lot of yard here to take care of, and we didn't get everything done last year. Let me put it that way. So there's a lot of remaining crap that's got to get done, and fallen trees that need to be cleaned up and all that jazz. So Crimean War runs from 1853 to 1856, and a bunch of different powers are involved. So on paper, the cause of it is the Russian Empire's insistence on quote unquote protecting the rights of Orthodox Christians in territory held by the Ottoman Empire. But the real geopolitical reason for everybody's involvement is the historic Russian desire to claim dominance over the Black Sea. And historically, that has meant seizing or taking or somehow grabbing Constantinople. What was at the time still called Constantinople, at least by folks in the West. A little unclear as to, I believe Istanbul was actually the locals' name for it for several hundred years, at least during the Ottoman period. So by this time, the Ottoman Empire is showing significant signs of crumbling. And that does include losing several wars to the Russians. The Russians generally came out better than they took in those preceding Russo-Turkish conflicts. So the British have a desire to maintain the balance of power. The Italian kingdom of Piedmont weighs in on this as well on the British side. And Napoleon III, that paragon of administrative and military competence. Although to some extent, I think Napoleon III's bad reputation is a bit overstated, but that's a topic for another time as well. Basically wants to do it because it'll be a cool foreign adventure. It's quite bloody. We have already had quotes from the Charge of the Light Brigade, the epic poem, in the chat, so I'm not going to bother you with that. But it essentially ends in a loss by the Russians. Let me put it that way. The British desire to maintain the existing balance of power outweighs all of the other considerations. And bear in mind that at this point, Europe had just been kind of swept by this wave of revolutions. And Britain and Russia were really the two powers in Europe that had not been significantly affected by that. The other great powers, the Prussians, the Austrians, Italy too, but Italy's certainly not a great power at this point since Italy's not even Italy yet, or Italy's not even Italy again, I should say, had been racked by the revolutions of 1848. France as well, right? That's how Napoleon III ended up as Prince President of the Second Republic, which was just as poorly prepared to actually run a nation state as the First Republic. And one could argue that the Third Republic was very dysfunctional as well, but it did last a while. As Brian Jarvis mentioned, yes, this is where Florence Nightingale came to attention. This is actually a really pretty important war. There's a sense in which this may be the first modern war. Remember that it precedes the American Civil War, which saw a number of things evolve and occur that would prefigure things like World War I. But the Korean War was first. This is the first war in which there is widespread military use of things like exploding shells and the telegraph and railroads. So it's a more important war than we often think of it as war gamers because there's not many games on it, right? We don't see much coverage. And a lot of the coverage that we do, and we'll see this when we get to the list. Last call on the War Diary giveaway. Hashtag War Diary to enter into the contest. If you have already won one of these, do not enter because I will scream at you. And if you win, you will email me at ardwulfslayer@gmail.com. The email address is in the ticker. So quite important war because it doesn't sort of exist in many of our traditional stomping grounds. And, maybe the folks in the UK have a better awareness of this than we do. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure that's the case. But yes, Florence Nightingale did make her name here by caring for folks in the Crimean War, which, whatever else, did kind of revolutionize nursing, if nothing else. So we have seen the Crimea games that we have seen have historically included kind of a lot of games on the same 2 or 3 battles, and we'll see that as we get through the games. And I don't, to be honest, know very much about very many of those battles. Vicky, thanks for stopping by. Welcome back. Mark Hodgkinson also, thanks for stopping by and welcome back. So let's do the drawing. We've had a last call, so let's push the button. Let's see who wins the big prize of the subscription to War Diary magazine, an outstanding magazine to which you should probably subscribe. Anyway, there is a PDF subscription as well, by the way. John Stanley, congratulations. John Stanley is the winner. John, please do get in touch with me by email, preferably immediately, so I can get your info over to the fine folks at War Diary magazine this evening. So congrats to John Stanley. And don't worry, we've got a bunch more of these to give away too. I believe this week will be 5 and 6. Next week will be 7 and 8, and the following week will be 8 and 9, and the following week we will have some more giveaways from my personal giveaway stash. Victoria's Cross is made of the melted. So Andrew Atkin asks, is the Victoria Crosses made of the melted Crimea War cannon thing debunked? I'm not sure about that. It's a good question, though. Not particularly sure. And so Queen Victoria would have been the the reigning monarch in England during this entire period, obviously. Um, so, well, there's reasons for this too, right? Don Longshore asks or says that he's been confused about as to why the British and French kept fighting even after the Russians had pulled back to their original positions. And they're trying to make a geopolitical point, right? They're not really fighting over the territory. They're fighting to maintain the balance of power. At least the British are. Napoleon III is there because for Napoleon III reasons. So Eric from Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles. Eric, thank you so much appreciated. If I do that less than half a dozen times tonight, I will be a bit surprised. I believe I've done it 3 times already. And if I've since I've done it, here we are. So thanks for the support, much appreciated. So outstanding. All right, so David Imperato mentions the quote unquote religious roots of the war. It's my opinion that this is usually just an excuse for to cover for other geopolitical goals, and I definitely that's definitely my opinion of the motivations behind the Korean War. Let me finish this bottle tonight. So taking a sip of scotch. Good thing I like scotch, huh? So Stigler, you're killing us here. You're killing us here. I cannot read this pun off on the chat because I do not wish to punish everybody. Adam Misnick. First of all, Adam, welcome to the stream. Thanks for stopping by. He believes Napoleon III's motivations in participating in the Korean War had more to do with disrupting the concert of Europe so that it would stop being focused on keeping France down. That's a plausible motivation. So the concert of Europe is kind of this not really treaty, sort of this agreement between the great powers that we've just had like a whole generation of shit that's been going down. Would really prefer that not to happen. Bismarck, of course, is a major figure in engineering this as well. So when we say balanced power in this context, there is a term for it, the concert of Europe. Napoleon the Third, boy, we could do a whole show on Napoleon the Third. Although I'd probably want an expert on the show to talk about that. But not the most competent fella, but the first 10 years of his administration actually went pretty well. But that was spent mostly doing domestic stuff and fixing Paris after many years of not having a great Paris. John C. from the sunny Philippines, thank you so much. He has verified that Victoria Crosses were not made from Crimea War cannon. I mean, that makes sense, but I don't know. In any way, so Napoleon III is a complex figure. There is no question that he was buffoonish in many ways. He was considered buffoonish by most of the people of France at the time, or at least most of the intellectuals and writers in France at the time. But the people generally liked him until he was stupid enough to get himself captured in the Franco-Prussian War. So then that didn't go very well, and that is the beginning of a whole bunch of big mess that France falls into at the end of the Franco-Prussian War, of which the big obvious thing is the foundation of the Third Republic, the government of Adolphe Thiers, and the Paris Commune, which certainly made Adolphe Thiers look bad. And Bismarck wasn't happy about Thiers amassing a giant army to march into Paris with either. So there's that. John Stanley points out that the 1853 Enfield rifle makes its appearance in the Crimean War as well. See, I did it correctly. Look at that. So Tony Mammal says that Napoleon III is much like Jaws 3, but not in 3D. So anyway, let's move on. We do have another giveaway later, so we'll do that in the last half an hour or so of the show. And I have already managed to blow 25 minutes. So I'm pretty sure we're still going to get 2 hours of show tonight. But let's share the stream and see what we are. Let's do it this way. Yeah. Okay, that's better. I did not have time to prepare slides today because I've been super busy for a variety of reasons, work related, other stuff related, yard work, all that stuff. This is Storming the Heights, Battle of the Alma, Crimea, 1854. This is a Joe Miranda design, and I'm not sure this thing ever actually came out. There's no date on it. It is also says Consim Press and GMT Games. I think I am delighted to retract this. Should I learn otherwise, if John Krantz would like to correct me, but it does kind of seem like Consim Press is currently kaput, or at least on hiatus. So that may have fallen prey to this. It's got a kind of a cool cover. I'm not sure if this was a cover or a poster or what. But this is the Battle of the Alma in 1854. This looks kind of intriguing, actually, and I'd have been curious to see this. But I'm not sure this ever came out. If anybody has information that it did and or has seen it, that would be great. I will note, excuse me, that the art, at least the map and counters, appear to have been done by Terry Leeds. And Terry Leeds is doing some really, really good work. I had not heard of Terry Leeds, at least not that I recollect, until Liberty or Death. And I'm like, wow, this is an awesome map. And then I started paying better attention and realized that Terry Leeds has in fact been doing stuff for quite a while. If this appeared in a recent paper, so I don't think this is the same game, to answer you, Richard DeFortuna. That that may be a different game, but we'll get to that. So don't worry. There's not that many that I can afford to skip over these. Excuse me. But in any event, I have no evidence that this came out, even though there's kind of a bunch of well, not a bunch, but there's a little bit of BGG traffic on this. Maybe there's more on Consim World. Chernaya River, the Battle of Traktir Bridge, 15 August 1855. And this is a board war game. This appeared in S&T in the Crimean War battles. Now, we will, of course, get to the Crimean War quad from SPI. And Decision did a partial redo of that. I'm not sure that there's two battles in here. I'm not sure that they did the other two from the Crimean War quad. And actually, they might not be the same battles, to be honest about it. So this is a tactical game of battle in 1855 between French and the forces of Sardinia, hilariously enough. That's the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. That's the House of Savoy that eventually ends up unifying Italy under is it Victor Emmanuel I? That may be the case. I'm not really sure. So this not amazing looking map. You do have what look like setup locations printed on the map, which is not a graphical technique that I favor. Design credited here to Stephen Ross, whose work I am not familiar with. And interestingly, here's the Crimean War quad, which is pictured here under this game, but this is not a re-implementation of that. So Nordic Maelstrom, thanks for stopping by. I have a lot of windows open on this stream, so I've got about six windows open. If it makes you feel any better, that is true. So I don't have a whole lot to say about this, other than it's a Decision Games title from the what's the date? 2000. So graphics are fairly rudimentary. I don't really have much more to say about it. We will see a number of games about the Battle of the Alma and a number of games about the Battle of Inkerman, and this is the first of those. This is Inkerman 1854, designed by Laurent Martin, published in Ve Victis magazine. Now, this is a 2013 game. I have, for reasons that ought to be relatively obvious, I have not handled this. What I can say is that a lot of the Ve Victis magazine games in this period were still coming out with unmounted counters that were printed on a stock very similar to what you would otherwise get like a player's aid card on. So not super duper deluxe, but despite that, these kind of look like mounted counters, to be honest about it. So maybe this is right on the edge. The map doesn't look too bad from what I can see. The counters look okay as well. They might be very dominated by that figure, and it does look like these are roughly half-inch or 9/16 counters. So hard to say. Kyle Harris is clipping Rising Sun ASL. My Rising Sun is actually clipped, believe it or not. I've got one 3-inch box and some overflow of ASL counters to clip. So really, when I'm starting, I got to finish this now that I've started it, though, right? All these games where I'm like, oh, I haven't arranged to clip anything. I really should be just hacking away at ASL counters because I got the storage bins all set up for them. I just haven't done the counters, and there's just so many. So, and I kind of dread doing the vehicles too because I don't feel like I have a good like handle on the counter mix for ASL vehicles. The SMCs and MMCs I'm pretty good on. So this is increment 1854. There's no rating on this game. It has not been rated by a sufficient number of people. So, which is a thing we'll see a fair amount of here when talking about the Crimean War. Nordic Maelstrom says he just got his Holy Grail game 3 Days of Gettysburg from GMT a couple weeks ago. That's fantastic. It's quite a good game. Unfortunately, they're redoing it. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news on that, but welcome to the club. That said, I'll be happy to buy a new edition of, and I have the last one. I'll be happy to buy a new edition of Three Dog because I think it's a good game that could be a really great game with a better written rule book and better scenarios, and that which is kind of where the lack is in that 3 Days of Gettysburg third edition, which is the last one, the previous one from GMT. The rule book, and this is inexcusable for a series as old as this is, the rule book is not clear in a number of places. And the scenario selection is also it's way too lean for a battle as big as that is. There's all kinds of interesting things going on the Gettysburg battlefield that would make good scenarios. And I frankly would like to chalk it up to laziness that we didn't get those scenarios. The trouble is that you'd have to make adjustments for the way the command chit system works to scale that game down. Because you're dealing with Gettysburg, right? It's that chit pull system is designed to deal with this huge battle, and they didn't figure that out or weren't motivated. They, meaning Mr. Berg, was not motivated to figure that out. So I do think it's a great game. I think it maybe could have used the stern hand of a developer at some point. So Nordic Maelstrom didn't want to wait for the reprint, so he used store credit at Noble Knight. I'm not sure if the Noble Knight sale is still going on. They did have a sale, and it might still be happening. I've been deleting their emails because I am broke. So, and Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp is clipping the Greatest Day Sword Juno or Gold Juno and Sword Juno and Gold. I forget what order it is on the box cover. But terrific game. Very much looking forward to adding Utah Beach to that mix, and I hope that we do eventually see Omaha as well. So Stigler's probably got some insight. David Imperato asks if Stigler's got any inside news on changes being made to the new edition of Three Dog. Dick Whitaker has talked a little bit about that on the GBACW group on Facebook. And I don't know. I think a lot of it's still in flux. I think they're working on it, but it is their intention to do like a general rules pass and update to bring it up to the current standards. And they are developing more scenarios, which is fantastic. So, and as Nordic Maelstrom confirms, yes, you can use the current GBACW rules with Three Dog. That represents basically no problems. But you will use the I think you'll use the Three Dog fire tables because there's weapons in there that's kind of a battle by battle situation, depending on what kind of armaments were present in a particular battle. And Brian Jarvis asks if that's on P500 yet. No, it is not. However, little birds are telling me that it will probably be on P500 fairly soon. So there's that. John Stanley asks a really good question. Do we get better games by looking at parts of a battle instead of trying to do the entire battle? So His example is Longstreet attacks versus 3 Days of Gettysburg. I mean, ideally, those two things would be showing you different things, right? You'd be getting, first of all, Longstreet attacks is, while it's only part of the battle, it's a big part of the battle, right? It's a large chunk of the whole thing at Gettysburg. So optimally, the scale on those two games is the same, though, right? They're both regimental games, and interestingly enough, they're both chip pull games, although the implementation of that is pretty different. Um, so I would say that if the designers are conscientious, and in both cases they're good designers. Herman Lettman versus Richard Berg, which I think is a comparison that Herman would probably be delighted to hear. Um, since I have a very high opinion of Richard Berg's design work, to be honest. I mean, he certainly had his idiosyncrasies and foibles as a designer, but he also designed some really really good stuff. So. Um, but in any case, I mean, maybe, right? Are you seeing that at a different scale? So Longstreet attacks is maybe not a great example because it is such a huge part of the battle. But maybe a game about Cemetery Hill or a game about Little Round Top, where you can really focus on that part of the battle independently and not have to worry about the whole rest of it. And I will tell you that I do think there's some challenges modeling Gettysburg. I'm not sure this is any more true of Gettysburg than any other big battle, to be honest about it. But there's some idiosyncrasies of the battle. The fog of war was a huge factor in the historical battle because Robert E. Lee had no idea what he was facing. Is he facing just some bozos, or is he facing the entire Union Army of the Potomac? And he turns out he was facing the entire Army of the Potomac, and that army managed to get in and into the battle more rapidly than he was able to react. In part because Jeb Stuart was out joyriding the Pennsylvania countryside. So. Um, and Stigler reaffirms that you can use the most current series rules, but the charts and tables from the original should be used instead. Nordic Maelstrom says that you could take each day of Gettysburg and make it 3 games, and of course, I totally agree with that. You totally could. One of the things that you'll find interesting about comparing 3 Days of Gettysburg to Last Chance for Victory is I think that 3 Days of Gettysburg has a much higher chance of looking very unlike the historical battle by the time that the second day dawns, versus Last Chance for Victory. That is accomplished in Last Chance for Victory by what some people have characterized as scripting. I am not sure I agree with that characterization, but there are certain things that you can choose to do, but you'll be penalized for them. Um, so um, I will allow Stigler to answer all the technical questions from any hypothetically revised Three Dog, which has not yet been formally announced. I really like Martin Sheen's. I really like the movie. It's not. It's cinematically. It's got some things going on, right? Starting with, but not limited to, the intensely fake-looking facial hair on basically all the actors, except of course for Sam Elliott, who I'm pretty sure whose mustache won an Oscar for that movie. But um, I liked Robert E. Lee's performance. It's like a Wargamers movie, right? It's the same thing with Waterloo with Rod Steiger. I don't really think it's that great of a movie. I think Gettysburg's a better movie. But we Wargamers like it because it dramatizes a subject matter that we are already pretty familiar with. And it's kind of a joy to see some of those actors work. Jeff Daniels, for example, in Gettysburg, and frankly, Rod Steiger, and just a considerably lesser extent, Christopher Plummer in Waterloo. Um, So I understand that pretty much. So the sequel to Gettysburg, prequel slash sequel to Gettysburg, Gods and Generals is the movie. I don't know about the book. The movie is dreadful, but I will say that Robert Duvall is a really good casting choice for Robert E. Lee. I will say that. So um, otherwise, the movie is rubbish. So in any event, we are moving on from Inkerman 1854. Um, and this is Horse and Musket, Sunset of an Era. This is a piece of the Horse and Musket system. And it's the part that deals with the Crimean, well, among other things. These games or modules or whatever, all have like a crap ton of battles in them. In this case, we've got some Sevastopol action. We've got Balaclava, which is also a Crimean War. We've got once again Inkerman, and that's it for Crimean War in here. Now, I haven't played Horse and Musket, but I know that it is reasonably popular. There's at least 4 or 5. I didn't say he distinguished himself, Stigler. I said he's a good casting choice. Actors rise and fall to some extent, at least, to the strength of their material or lack thereof. He did not have good material to work from, and I actually did like Stephen Lang as Stonewall Jackson too, even though he had played George Pickett in Gettysburg. So that's a little bit weird. In any case, Horse and Musket. This is a pretty well regarded series, and actually, I should pop this up. Um, Hollenspiel has redid this at one point. This whole series is a Sean Chick design, and they like came out with new, somewhat revised editions in larger boxes. There's like a ton of material for this. Each of these games has like a crap load of battles from the entire quote unquote musket and horse period. This first set covers 1863, 1683, all the way to 1719. And the other thing with the Crimean War stuff that we were just looking at has a similar breadth from 1824 to 1866, which also includes Königgrätz. So, there's a lot going on here. So this might be worth a look if you are interested in an easy to play tactical system from this era. I'll give you a little peek at the counters. I think this is why this thing got a deluxe treatment, because it's on a hex map with hex tiles, and superficially this looks a lot like Commands and Colors. But I don't believe this Cardboard Conflicts is actually saying this exact thing in the chat right now. I don't believe this plays very, I mean, to some extent it probably does. But the scale also appears to be let's say undefined, as is the case with Commands and Colors. So Cardboard Conflicts, who's apparently knows more about this than I do. It's Commands and Colors, only without the command cards. You use command action points, so easier to solo and not as much randomness. So that right there is pretty attractive. And I think components wise, this thing looks good. This is, of course, printed on demand, like everything from Hollenspiel. But we go through these lists, and I feel like we shortchange Hollenspiel a lot, actually, and that's my fault more than anything else. But that's also somewhat of a topical choice. The folks running Hollenspiel, Amabel, seem to prefer offbeat topics. So there's like, have they done a World War II game? I'm not sure they have. They've done a couple of World War One things. Well, at least one World War One thing, but Empire at Sunrise is really offbeat World War One. So Andrew Atkin asks, is there a good Antietam movie as good as Gettysburg? The answer to that is no, I'm afraid. So there's that. Oh yeah, David Imperato. Yeah, that's correct. Oscar Goldman is the guy that plays Meade. I forget the actor's name. But he's a television character actor that shows up and does a really good job, but he has very little screen time. It's an interesting choice that the film chose to spend so much time with Lee and so little time with Meade. And I'm not sure that, I mean, this is a function of the book that it's based on, right? Richard Anderson, but clarified by David Imperato. So Tom Berenger has said that his favorite role is Longstreet in Gettysburg that he's played, and I believe that he was terrific as Longstreet. Bruce Boxleitner, who I like, right? He was on Babylon 5 after all, and in Tron, the original Tron, and actually in the sequel as well. Plays Longstreet in Gods and Generals, and the fake beard is absolutely laughable in that. Good call. Findle70 points out the Brian Train Battle of the Scheldt game. that was that very early Hollandspiel release. I want to say that was one of their first half dozen games. Good call on that. John Stanley mentions that Glory's opening scenes are at Antietam. That is actually correct. Yes, and so this is actually John Longshore points out that Tom Hanks plays George Gordon Meade in 1883. That kind of makes me want to see that, but I also don't want to subscribe to whatever channel 1880. Is that on the Paramount network? Is that an accurate statement? Because I'm probably gonna sooner or later subscribe to the Paramount network. And does Tom Hanks play Meade in 1883, or is that an earlier thing to the Civil War? Findle 70 says that the movie's a function of who Ted Turner's boyhood heroes were, and I think obviously I don't know obviously, but I'm not going to speak for Ted here. But it's also the book, right? It's based on a book by Michael Shara that David Imperato. I think the extended version is the version to watch of Gettysburg. We're spending as much time on the Civil War as we are the Crimean War here, unfortunately. But hey, we got to talk about something. And as we have mentioned, there's not a ton of material on the Crimean War. So, Horse and Musket expansion, Sunset of an Era. Next up is another from Hollandspiel, The Heights of Alma. This is Amabel's game, actually, and it's 2019, and there's some videos of it, but there are unfortunately zero pictures of this, so I can't really get a sense of it. Apparently, this is an expanded version of Blood in the Alma. And it's the Battle of the Alma, right? I don't have a sense of this. I feel like I need to see pictures to give me a sense of what this is like. But I do think that generally speaking, the stuff from Hollandspiel is minimally interesting, even if you end up finding that it doesn't necessarily. I don't want to make blanket statements like that, because some of those games do have a lot of replay value, but there's a lot of offbeat topics in there. And I'm not sure how much replay value you're going to get out of a topic like this. Let me put it that way. Kyle Harris agrees with me. The extended version is very well worth it. And Ewell does show up. I mean, I think he's in the regular cut too, but for like seconds. So this might be the case. This is another one of these where it's like a new version of a previous game, but there's no re-implementation of Tag on Board Game Geek. So we're plumbing the uncharted depths of Board Game Geek's database in this case as well. So Stigler points out that, and he's talking about gods and generals here because Stonewall Jackson's dead by the time of Gettysburg. That it's Jackson is kind of the main character of that, and he's painted in a very positive light. And then they leave out the most interesting things that Stonewall Jackson did. So that's a bad choice. To what extent it leans on the novel, I have no idea. I haven't read that novel and have no plans to do so. This has to be a rhetorical question. Well, so Nordic Maelstrom may not realize that Stigler not only is on the development team for this series, but it has had the next game in the series is designed by him as well. The GBACW series from GMT. So yes, Stigler has a copy of Death Valley. And Stigler is one of the folks I would go to for guidance on American Civil War games as well. I'll point that out. And he's now playing Lava Tai. So there's that. So tune in Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for our interview with Dennis Spores, which should be very exciting. All right, moving on from yet another Alma game. We have yet another Alma game. This actually came out in 2021. Yes, that date is correct. And I'm pretty sure this was a CSR Award nominee. This is Battle of the Alma by Ty Bamba. It appeared in Paper Wars magazine. And it doesn't appear to be the same game that we talked about at the very beginning. So I have heard pretty good things about this. And in fact, so here's the counter sheet, cellophane wrapping and all. That's pretty annoying. I will say that I have Bomba's Austerlitz game from a year or two ago. Um, and it actually looks intriguing in an experimental mechanics type of way. Um, so I may give that a shot at some point, but so Stigler, I'm not sure you're on my level as far as just issuance of hot air. I mean, I'm in this room sweating my ass off right now because there's lights and things, and the dehumidifier's full, and I got to deal with that too. So, anyway, Marlon Salazar thought Martin Sheen was miscast as Robert E. Lee. I think to some extent that's true, but I think Sheen nevertheless did a very good job. So I don't really have a problem with the casting as such. I mean, the running joke is that Ty Bomba designs all include NATO nukes and Nazis at some point. In fact, he played into that by making a game called NATO nukes and Nazis. So Stigler points out, and he's responding to somebody here. So Nordic Maelstrom is asking if Stigler agrees with Double Dan Sickles' stunt of going out and taking a forward position on the second day at Gettysburg. And there is a sense in which Sickles maintained that the result of the battle was that he deserved a large measure of credit for the result of the battle. Let me put it that way. Sickles was a political appointee and not incredibly talented, but as political appointees went, he was pretty far from the worst. Nordic Maelstrom, I am literally clipping Musket and Pike dual pack as we speak. There's a sense in which I think Sickles had a point when he said that retroactively, in the sense that, yes, it was a dumb stunt, but he did tie up considerable Confederate bandwidth and momentum that the Confederates had to expend in extracting him from that forward position. So I am forced to give Sickles a little bit of credit. There is not credit's the wrong word, right? It was a stunt that ended up being, I think, a significant contribution to the battle. And had he not done that, the battle might have gone differently. I mean, the end result of the battle might have been different. And yes, Dan Sickles is in fact, as Stacking Limit points out, and this is absolutely true, the actual originator, or his attorney was, of the not guilty by reason of insanity defense. That was his actual precedent-setting defense in the Barton Scott Key case, which is he killed the son of his wife's lover, the son of Francis Scott Key, that Francis Scott Key, and he just like walked up to him at a party or something like that and shot him dead. And then he claimed, and public opinion was on Sickles' side here. So there's a book about Sickles, which I think is called Sickles at Gettysburg. That's pretty good and illuminating. He's an interesting character. I wouldn't go so far as to say he's as interesting as, say, Jean Bernadotte, but he's an interesting character, and it's interesting to track his career. He did not get along with Meade, and that's why he specifically ignored what Meade's orders were. So, but pretty far from the least talented political general on either side, to be honest. Didn't have a lot of military experience going in, but he was at least reasonably smart and competent, generally speaking. Well, that's E4 Airman. That's the double. We're not going to solve that particular double standard here tonight, talking about the Battle of the Alma. So in any event, this game was reasonably well received, even though it is unrated on BGG. So it was, there were not protestations of, oh, I hate this turd when this thing came out. Oh, yeah, this was not, he never claimed he didn't do it or anything like that. Next up is Charge of the Light Brigade. This is a 2020 release by Gary Graber and Minden Games. And if I am not mistaken, it is a solitaire game. And if I am not mistaken, this is a book, one of these book solitaire games. Um, Findle 70 points out not the worst general in the Civil War is the same as saying not the worst QB that played for the Browns since 2000. Yeah, and I was thinking the other day that if you need an incentive, this is how it worked out for me to not get into sports. That there's a really easy solution to that, which is to be from Cleveland. So the Browns being the pinnacle of that situation. Um, so yeah, I mean Bleh. There were some bad generals on both sides um, in the American Civil War. So let's put it that way. So the latest issue of the Civil War Quarterly, is it called Civil War Gazette, something like that? There's a magazine about the Civil War. Has a huge feature on Benjamin Butler, actually. So that might be something to take a look at. I'm not sure. I didn't buy it because magazines cost $8 now. So so we didn't do that, but I was tempted, and I was reading it on the newsstand while my wife was doing other things in Target or Meijer or wherever the hell we were. So um, Nordic Maelstrom says, "Imagine the Battle of Gettysburg if Hancock wasn't there." It's a good point, right? But also imagine the Battle of Gettysburg if Reynolds was there after the first day. So I mean, everybody likes. I don't want to say everybody, but lots of Gettysburg games include a hypothetical where what if Stonewall Jackson is there, and maybe that makes a difference. And I think that the results of that experiment are going to show more about the game design than necessarily about the history. But take that for what it's worth. Um, John Stanley mentions Field of Lost Shoes. And I haven't watched that, but it does culminate in the Battle of Newmarket. Um, and I will say that I have seen parts of it, and it seems to me that it provides a unfortunately common romanticized portrait of the period, and is not a good piece of history, nor is it a particularly remarkable movie, to be honest about it. Leslie Davis, Frank, thanks for stopping by. Much appreciated. I mentioned, you know what, Frank, I did this for you so that I would pick obscure games that you couldn't buy, unless you want to run them down for hundreds of dollars on the secondary market. But we haven't gotten to those yet. So if you're bowing out now, that is perhaps not a bad idea. Another yeah, so the Iron Brigade did so much of the work for the Union on the first day of Gettysburg, um that it came out of that battle absolutely wrecked. That is a correct statement. So the grandpa of World War II's George Patton is I believe the character that Ted Turner has a cameo of in the movie Gettysburg. I could be wrong I might be misremembering that, but I think so. And of course he does, you see him and he just got shot. Never mind. Sorry, Ted. But Ted paid for the movie, so, and it is a movie I enjoy. So the Gettysburg, that is not any of the other films that we've been talking about here. Not that that's the only good Civil War movie. It's not, but it's probably not the best Civil War movie either. Many folks will agree, and I can certainly see this as a reasonable case to be made, that Glory is probably the best Civil War movie. There are things that Gettysburg is just not equipped to portray, that Glory does. Let me put it that way. So, in any case, let's. I don't have a lot to say about this Gary Graber Minden Games Charge of the Light Brigade. It is during Balaclava, which is the literal charge of the the Right Brigade, the Light Brigade. That was made famous by Tennyson, as PGG puts it here, as Lord Cardigan. I would just like to point out how awesome it is that there is a Lord Cardigan here at this battle. So next Christmas, I will demand that my family refer to me as Lord Cardigan. Um, since that's basically the only time I will actually wear a sweater. pretty much. Patton's a good movie too. It should really be seen, I think, as a biographical sketch rather than as a war film. But that's a semantic point to some extent, right? Anyway, moving on from Charge of the Light Brigade and Balaclava. Here's another Charge of the Light Brigade and Balaclava. This is a 2001 release by Warp Spawn Games, who I think I've heard of, but boy, this is an interesting looking thing. And it's a solo dice and record keeping game. So when I say this looks actually really, really interesting, I don't necessarily mean I need to run this down and play it. What I mean is that we're kind of seeing a lot of this type of thing nowadays, and I really wonder what this 2001 thing from 22 years ago looks like in that context. So it sounds kind of intriguing, and it's not a miniatures game. That's about the only other thing I can tell you. And there's cards which look like they're published. There's no copies of this for sale. Is there ever a copy of this for sale on Board Game Geek? No. So if you're looking for this, I'm going to suggest that Noble Knight may in fact be your best bet. But this looks kind of interesting, to be honest about it. First Minnesota, Peter Fulford. Yeah, first Minnesota. That's that. That's one of the sort of points of thing. I've just noticed the ad for this butt plug looking thing on this page. So let's move along from this thing. This totally looks like a miniatures game, but it's not. It is a hex and counter game. This is La Carga de la Brigada Ligera, Batalla de Balaclava. So yet another game, 3 games in a row. And I did this in BGG's order, not mine. I didn't do this on purpose. Okay. So Kilroy knows about this. So Warp Spawn is a print and play web publisher. And he says the game's not bad. That looks kind of interesting, right? If 2001 is the real data on that, assuming BGG is not totally making that up, that's kind of a precursor to kind of a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now. So I find that very interesting sounding. Uh, Andrew Atkin is talking about Lord Cardigan once again. I would just like to reinforce the point that Lord Cardigan is in charge here. That is actually fantastic. Rob Johnson says if you get to visit West Point, there's plaques on the walls talking about which famous officers bunked there. That'd be interesting to see. I've driven past West Point a couple of times, but I've never stopped. So I just assumed they were not going to just let me in. So there didn't seem to be much point in stopping. Although I'm sure there's a tour. Okay, so there's a couple of interesting things going on with this. Okay, this is designed by Adolfo Suarez. And it is a battle again. It's another balaclava game, and it's a hex and counter game with a map that looks pretty rudimentary. But here's what I think is actually pretty interesting here, and maybe somebody in the chat knows the nasty on this. Nike and Cooper Espanola SA, is that NAC War Games? Because this logo looks a lot like the NAC War Games logo, and okay, this is totally NAC War Games, whose stuff is now available in the US. You'll have to go to their website for that. They do a number of interesting things. Why are they credited on Cobra and Firefight? Is there really a NAC War Games version of this? There could be. I didn't know that, but yeah, okay. Here's the Nike and Cobra Spanish edition, actually, with the NAC War Games logo on it. And wow. That box has seen better days, folks. But in any case, not the greatest looking game, but it's 1987. I didn't know NAC War Games has been around since 1987. But that's one of the sort of tunnel vision things that we Americans can unfortunately fall prey to when we assume that the entirety of the war game hobby, at least the board war game hobby, exists in the United States with 1 or 2 people up in Canada. So and that hasn't been true for a long time. So it's actually quite interesting that that they're still around and they've been around for this long. I think that by itself is kind of remarkable. I'm throwing these counters everywhere here. I don't have anything intelligent to say about the game. Let me put it that way. But it's pretty old, and it looks like Noble Knight is selling it for 720. So this is probably not super duper collectible, but I would examine that listing at Noble Knight pretty closely too, because this is a pretty obscure game. Once again, unrated, and we're not going to get ratings on these until we get fairly high on the list. Bloody Steppes of Crimea, Alma, Balaclava, and Inkerman, 1854. This is from Stratagemata, which I believe to be an Italian publisher, and a cool publisher name, by the way. And by Slavomir Lukasic. Probably not pronouncing that correctly, but it's the best I can do. So Stu Joe confirms that Nike and Cooper is the old NAC War Games, and that they are now owned by Masqueoka, but they don't carry the old Nike and Cooper games. Well, I assume that the Nike and Cooper games are all out of print anyway, right? Stuka Joe says Stratagemata is Polish. Okay, I didn't know that. There's a couple of publishers of Polish board war games, though. I know that. There's Tactica e Strategia, or Strategia, and there's at least one other one at which somebody will remind me of. I'm gonna get some. I'm gonna get some continued mileage out of Lord Cardigan, just so you folks know that that's coming. Mander says that West Point has a publicly accessible museum, which is pretty cool. But when we've driven past it, we've been in the middle of a drive to Connecticut, pretty much. So I'm unlikely to stop on that particular trip. In any case, this is a tactical game with 3 different battles, and if we look at the map, for a game that how old is this? This is 2014. It's not that old. So I was gonna give it credit for a fairly attractive map of the era, but it's in a different era than I expected it to be. So, um, potentially interesting looking game. And now I have learned that Stratagemata is Polish. When will probably assume the next time I mention their games, which is unfortunately not often enough, right? I'd like to highlight more of these European games, but unfortunately, I don't speak any of these languages. I'm best in German, and really the only German publisher that I'm really aware of is VUCA Simulations at this point in Germany that's at least doing stuff in the spaces that I'm interested in. There's at least one other one, but VUCA is the big name over there in German board war games. All right, next up is Bloody Retribution. This is a 2022 release from Paper Wars. And once again, it is a Time Bomba design. Now, what I wonder here is, does this use the same system as the Battle of the Alma? Not sure who did the art, although it probably says right here. Paul Stuhlfaut. And not a bad looking map. The counters look fine too. I can't tell offhand if this is the same system from the counters, but it is similar in that they basically got an ID and one big factor on them. So it's possible that this is the same system, and somebody here will know. Nordic Maelstrom. Shigler will answer this, and he'll have more up-to-date information than I do on the topic, but they are working on Antietam. I can tell you that is a project in the works. I don't have any good sense of how soon we will see it. I have a hunch that the next P500 entry for GBACW will in fact be the new version of Three Dog. Stigler may know that, and he may know that and not be permitted to talk about it. So bear that in mind, that he may be under a hush-hush order on that. So anyway, once again, Time Bomba design. This has been, I have not heard a lot of complaints about this one either. And it's pretty recent, so it's not it doesn't have any ratings yet, and that might be why, even though it's got a relatively high profile publication. Next up is Blood in the Fog. This is another Amabel Holland design, and it is another design from Hollandspiel. And this is another game on the Battle of Inkerman. You will notice that every one of these tactical battles and they have all been tactical battles, have been on the Alma or Inkerman or Balaclava, or all three, or more than one, I should say. So this is it's a hex encounter game. Ilya Kudryashov, I think, is the artist on this. So it's got that sort of corner caltrop style hexes, which I know a lot of people don't like, but doesn't particularly bother me. Yep, Ilya Kudryashov, and I could tell because that's the character. That is a characteristic of the artist, but it's not like you're the only artist is the only person doing that. So there's that. The counters have airplanes on them. What? I'm not seeing that. I think these are decent looking counters too, to be honest. They do have they're the 3D printed. They're the print on demand counters, obviously. So they do have center nibs, but the hexes tend to be roomy enough that it's not a huge deal. You can cut these out of the sprue, but you risk bodily injury doing that because this is really thick material that the stuff is printed on. So Stigler says he just got raw materials for the playtest. He's probably fairly high on the GBACW Christmas card list. So if he just got the components, I would imagine it's going to be a year or two before GMT even thinks of putting it on P500. So Alan Salazar, we'll get to that in a moment. So, and Team's a cool battle too. It's a very interesting battle. Here's another Battle of the Alma from 3W. This is an interesting. At some point, we will do a show on 3W, and a lot of their various idiosyncrasies. But I feel like I don't know enough about who ran the place and how it was run and the sort of the full scope of things that they published. They were around for quite a while, and they had a pretty high output when they were around. Nordic Maelstrom asks if I prefer counters with NATO symbols or images. It really depends on the topic. If, for example, I am playing an Ancients game, then obviously NATO symbols are not appropriate, or a Civil War game for that matter, or even a World War I game. Although I have seen examples of games on all three of those topics that nevertheless use NATO symbols. I generally prefer NATO symbols, but it does depend on the game, right? If we are dealing with sort of a strength point driven game like GCACW, although GBACW kind of has strength points as well. But I'm thinking of GCACW or War and Peace or something like that. Then I don't think it matters, and it may provide clearer iconography when there are only, say, different types of units: infantry, artillery, and cavalry. Although I'll point out that even War and Peace has more than that. There are also Landwehr units, there's Landwehr points, I should say, there's guard points, there's guard cavalry points. So, and the iconography for that in War and Peace in particular was bad. So I don't have a particular preference, but certainly for World War II, or anything after that, I will fairly strongly prefer NATO symbols. But also recognize that there are games that use both types of iconography for a reason. Examples of this would be both Goss from Decision Games and the Mark Simonich operational games from GMT. In both cases, the use of like a silhouette or profile of the tank is telling you that it is to be considered an armor unit for purposes of the rules. And Goss even has hybrid battalions that have both a NATO symbol and a counter profile vehicle profile on it, and that's telling you that that unit has both elements. So I generally, I would say I prefer NATO symbols, but it's not so strong a preference that I will not play a game without NATO symbols. I hate silhouettes or hats. Hats are unacceptable on no, I don't care about that much. Generally, though, I think for me the NATO symbols tend to be more functional. for a lot of topics, at least. So Stigler says that Greg Laubach, who is the designer on that, has a lot of battles. Playtesting only started relatively recently, maybe 2 more years of developing. And I believe we're still talking about the GBACW Antietam game, which is a guaranteed pickup for me, to be honest about it. So Manders just got a Kickstarter notice for the next game in Worthington's Civil War Brigade series on Gettysburg. So there's now currently 3 games in that series. There's Antietam, Shiloh, and the 7 Days Battles was kickstarted and delivered relatively recently. That is a very simple brigade level Civil War game that I think the basic mechanics of are really, really solid. I'd be curious to see the 7 Days game because I did not like the way that the victory conditions were structured in the Antietam game. It's got magic hexes that you have to fight over. Their objective hexes, basically because they were ground that people fought over at the actual battle. There's no other reason than that. And I didn't like that. But the Shiloh battle does not have that problem, and there's nothing really wrong with the system at all. It's clean, it's slick, it's easy to play. So although I don't have any of those games anymore because of bandwidth issues. I do have a pretty good opinion of the Worthington Civil War Brigade Battle series, and that very clunky series name is necessary because there's already a Civil War Brigade series and a Civil War Battle series. Nordic Maelstrom says the Library of, and he's quite right. Library of Napoleonic Battles games use NATO symbols, and I think it works fine. And it's been sort of a convention in war games to use NATO symbols for Napoleonic topics, and I'm not sure why. We may be able to blame Kevin Zucker for that, for all I know. Nordic Maelstrom asks if I have looked at the new Traveler 2300 AD. So I've recently learned that I do not, in fact, have every 2300 AD or Traveler 2300 product released by Game Designers Workshop. There's a couple that I am missing, or they haven't turned up, which pretty much means that they're missing at this point. In addition to that, Mongoose did a hardcover for 2300 AD for their first edition Traveler. And I do have that, and it's pretty nice. And I like the Mongoose first edition Traveler, and the biggest liability of it, as far as I'm concerned, is just the book's ugly. And their 2300 AD book is not ugly. So that was a product that was a thing that that particular product did not fall victim to. Now they did several supplements for that. They have relatively recently, as in the last year or year and a half or so, begun bringing out 2300 AD product for the Mongoose Traveler second edition game, and there are already a few things out for that. I have not picked any of those up yet. I will note that the war zone that I went to just north of Cleveland Hopkins Airport does in fact have those in stock on the shelf, which may collapse upon you at any time upon entering that store. So so there's that. So I apologize to everybody whose comments I am missing, but I'm just trying to stay caught up here and still move our chat forward, and we still got tons of time here. So Battle of the Alma, this is Rob Markham design by 3W. It's kind of got one of these. It's interesting, the box design on 3W stuff I think is really generally really good. I wonder who was doing their trade dress and box art here. Now, these images do look a lot like they got them from Osprey books, and that may be the case. I don't know, but it's still a pretty nice, striking cover. Is there an artist quest credited here? Nope, didn't think so. This is not a hideously expensive game if anybody really wants to play this out. 3 scenarios for the battle and a campaign game, 300 counters, so not terribly small. Is this the counters? This is the counters. Now, on the other hand, their counters were generally not great. And I actually feel like early Decision games was imitative graphically of 3W more than anybody else. And there is a lineage there. So Nordic Maelstrom just ordered the new second edition 2300 AD. It's a big box set. It certainly looks nice. Agri Day asks, what would be the reason to get the 2300 AD if you already have Traveler for the setting? It is a setting book. There's mechanics in it, but it's a setting book. So it is a very different and differently themed and tonally different science fiction setting than the official Traveler universe. Let me put it that way. FTL works very differently. The aliens are totally different. Um, so there, and it's a pretty interesting and generally more hard sci-fi setting than one normally finds in games. And it's pretty well developed. So so that's why you're still going to need the core book from Mongoose Traveler's or whatever version of Mongoose Traveler. It's not a standalone game unless you go all the way back to Game Designer's Workshop. Let me put it that way. Alistair Logie, you have missed the first giveaway, but we have one more coming in probably roughly 20 minutes. I guess we'll talk about this. The official Traveler universe, that third Imperium setting, is it's got a bit of a veneer of hard science fiction, but it's really not. And I don't believe that anybody that was involved in its development really feels like it is hard science fiction. It is a space opera setting. 2300 AD is much more hard sci-fi than the official Third Imperium setting, and much less space opera. But it's kind of a hard space opera, if you will, which is a thing I really like. Hard space opera, actually. And yeah, so another thing about the 2300 AD setting is so I mean the official Traveler universe adventure in the far future, and it is like several thousand years from now. The 2300 AD setting is in 2300 AD, and it is actually the future of the Twilight 2000 setting. Um, I'd have to check that. So Peter Fulford mentions that 2300 AD is meant to invoke aliens or evoke, I believe you mean, alien a lot of the time. And that's true. It could totally be played that way. And the Kafer they're not really like the aliens from Aliens, but they're meant to be similarly menacing. Let me put it that way. Agri Day asks if Mark Miller was involved in Traveler 2300. I'm not sure, to be honest. My instinct says no, but I will be happy to be proven to be full of shit on that. It did not use, and this was a problem with because it was originally released as Traveler 2300. Okay, but then it didn't use the Traveler system, although it used some elements of that system are in fact inspired by Traveler, which of course it's the same publisher, so why not? But it's quite a different system at the fundamental level, and it didn't use the Traveler setting, so it created a great deal of brand confusion that I don't believe helped it at all. And even GDW figured that out relatively quickly and came out with a new edition of it, which was rebranded as 2300 AD instead of Traveler 2300. So, and I know Frank Chadwick was involved in that. I'm just not sure if Mark was involved in any way. I don't think he was the designer. But yes, the 2300 setting now uses the Mongoose Traveler system. So, no. Peter Fulford, I believe the answer to your question, did the original 2300 AD include the USSR as a faction? I don't believe so. Because so remember that it came out. Remember that 2300 AD is the continuation of Twilight 2000, right? So there is an American presence, but I also don't believe that to be the United States of America necessarily. I might be misremembering this. And I recall no mention of the Soviet Union at all. I believe the conceit is that the Soviet Union as such had been completely eradicated. The big powers, the big interstellar powers in 2300 are the Americans, the French, which are the big one actually, and the Chinese. And there are some other sort of lesser powers that the Bavarians are out there as well. And in fact, the adventure, the sort of epic adventure Bayern, which is sort of meant to evoke, I think, 2001 and 2010, which Mongoose is coming back out with. I'm very curious to see that. But that was a Bavarian design ship. actually. And Lee Hanna mentions it, and Lee's the person I would ask about this. USSR is gone, replaced by Ukraine, which is allied with the French, and Russia, which is independent but not a first tier power at 2300 AD. So there you go. Answered on that. Lee is my go-to man, answer man for 2300 stuff. Anyway, and the Crimean War uniforms are pretty cool. So anyway, this is the Battle of Balaclava by Palatoy Limited. And BGG seems to feel that it's a war game, but it's BGG. So even the description says it's more of a family game. And that certainly is borne out by this map. And bear in mind that this thing dates from 1975. If a game came out with a map that looked a lot like not iconographically, but sort of structurally looked like this nowadays, I would assume that it's something along the lines of that hold the line, not hold the line, but press your luck thing that, or whatever that positional series of games is called, that has been come out. A number of them are from Worthington. I can't remember the name of that mechanic, because it's not a mechanic that I have ever experienced. So yeah, so I want to say, and I if Lee has something to say about this, I'll be happy to defer to him. But I think the Mongoose editions kind of less explicitly tie it into Twilight 2000, but it is very much an alternate history. Yes, there was a big nuclear war. Yes, the Soviet Union got wiped out, but I think Mongoose is a little less direct about that because they don't have the rights to 2300 AD. That has gone to Free League. And their new edition of Twilight 2000 actually looks pretty good to me. I do have it. It certainly looks nice. Next up is Balaclava, the Charge of the Light Brigade by SPI. We don't need to cover this because we're going to cover this in a minute. I should have cut it out. So here is Balaclava, Breaking the Siege, 25 October 1854 by Chris Perello and Decision Games. And this is one of the Decision either folios or minis. Kind of looks like a mini. And of course, this, it sort of says mini in the description here, but BGG's not telling me. This uses the musket and saber quick play system. And graphics wise, this isn't too bad. I mean, bear in mind, this is a very small game. These are designed, this is, by the way, regardless of what your opinion on these Decision minis and folios are, when people ask, where are all the simple war games? Here's a whole bunch of them here. Decision's got a crap ton of these, and they're all pretty simple and straightforward, and perhaps not too super satisfying for somebody like me. I point people at these all the time when that question inevitably comes up because we don't do any simple war games, right? Which has always been completely nonsense. Lee says that Mongoose 2300 basically says that the Twilight War happened, but doesn't really go into the details. Yeah, that's basically my sense of it. And let's face it, by the year 2000, the setting of Twilight 2000 had been made nonsensical, right, historically. So in any event, Balaclava, once again, covering this same battle. And do we have the whole counter sheet here? We do have the whole counter sheet here. So I think it's safe to say that this is in fact one of the minis and not one of the big games. This is a pretty typical counter count for the minis, by the way. 20 to 60 counters is pretty typical. And they're not all bad games. If you just want a simple, light beer and pretzels, but nevertheless hex and counter thing, they're not all hex and counter either, but a lot of them are. I will happily point folks at the Decision Games minis and folios. I think they're a really interesting, low-cost way to get into war games. Alistair Logie demands a 3D printed storage solution. I may be able to print a 3D printed wallet that this game can fit in, actually. That would be amusing. Florence Nightingale was during the Crimean War. That is correct, Agri Day. We have mentioned that already, but that was a while ago. All right, it is time for giveaway number 2. No cancer, no more. Hashtag no cancer, no more. We'll get you into the drawing to win a subscription to War Diary magazine. It is a fabulous magazine. If you didn't hear my pitch of it before, so please put that in the chat if you want to win. Now, if you have already won one of these, don't enter again because I will be mad. But if you have not yet won, then you can absolutely enter, and we still have some more of these coming next week and the week after as well. So if you are the winner, you need to email me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. That email address is in the ticker that is running at the bottom of your screen right now with your information, name, actual name that we can ship stuff to, and actual shipping address or post office box. I don't care. And we can get that over to the fine folks at War Diary Magazine, and we can get you your magazines in the works. So, like I said, it's a great magazine. I'm really happy to read it when it occasionally arrives. So, and I'll mention that if you are a subscriber, you get a bunch of discounts on a variety of different publishers. The one that always sticks out to me is Diffraction Entertainment. Subscribers to War Diary get a discount on Diffraction Entertainment stuff. The reason that sticks out is because it's saving you the most money because their stuff is all very expensive. That is not a complaint about their prices as such. It is an observation that says that the actual MSRP is really quite high, but you are also generally getting rather a lot of material in their games too. So, and if you like that system, then go for it. I say that with complete sincerity. If you are not sure whether you will like that system or not, then I will direct you to the Second World War series combat walkthrough that was done by Doug over at the Tabletop's Edge. Watch that video, and if you, after watching that video, believe that that is the game system for you, then you should absolutely push the button. If you, as I did, back slowly away in horror, then I'm exaggerating for humorous effect here, right? But at the same time, it was Doug that made it clear to me that was gonna for me that was just gonna be too much. But there are people that do like it. So and Mark Ruggiero is one of them actually. So good for Mark. I wish everybody will play more of the games that they really like. And if that is a game I don't like, who cares what I think? That doesn't mean anything. Hashtag no cancer, no more will get you entered into the drawing to win an issue of, not an issue, a subscription to War Diary Magazine, courtesy once again of Mark Ruggiero, as special thanks to the hobby for having his back when this whole thing went down. So much appreciated. John Longshore, who has, I think, everything that they've done, and whose copy of Mare Nostrum I got to paw through. What is this? Oh, that's more Musket and Pike. Am I done? Am I done with this? Is this even possible? If I had a Korean if I had a Crimean war game, I would be punching that this evening. Nope, I'm not done. Holy God, there's 3 more counter sheets. There's 2 more counter sheets in this thing. I have not punched this, clip anything from here. Well, not on this stream. So that is my partial excuse for not being done with this yet. And of course, they're all in baggies right now. So baggies. Because this is going to need a 3D printed solution. There are both 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch by 1 inch counters in this thing. So now's a great chance to finish off this scotch anyway. So I see I wasn't the only, at least I got it myself and I didn't have to, you guys didn't have to yell at me about it. So hashtag no cancer, no more. Last call on this. We have 63 entries so far. There'll be more of these coming up and additional giveaways after we're done with the subscriptions as well. So yeah, if they want to do a Mare Nostrum is absolutely crazy. It is crazy. The number of maps in that thing is just, I felt like I was just opening maps up and looking at them for like an hour. It is crazy big. So, and it's Singapore, which is the one I've got. I got a couple of them now, actually, but Singapore, which is the one I've got, is one of the few games that I have that just will not fit in this game room. By the way, that game room is not big enough to accommodate that map laid out contiguously. I have very few other things that just won't fit regardless of table arrangement in that room. but that is one of them. Case Blue is another one that's a bit of a problem. I did the even if I built like a custom table for Case Blue, it still doesn't work. I would have to break it up into two pieces to get Case Blue to fit in that room. Now that's not a problem. There's like a half a map overlap in Case Blue between the Animate the Gates section and the Case Blue section. So Jeff Beeler asks, what order are we looking at the games in? We are looking at the games in reverse ranking order. Last call on No Cancer No More. Hashtag No Cancer No More. Case Blue is for when I build the luxurious 16 by 24 gaming shed. That's what's going to take, I believe. Nordic Maelstrom asks if I can fit all the maps from the East Front series. Actually, I think I could. I'd have to like build a custom table for it or work out some kind of modular table agreement. Brent McCabe, no, and the game room's a disaster right now, so probably not soon, but we'll see. You'll hopefully see some video from it soon. I did do the shelves tour. I filmed the video and then never got it into editing. So yeah. Anyway, we're pushing the button. If you are the winner, you must email me your information at ardwulfslayer@gmail.com. Who will be the lucky winner? Nordic Maelstrom, who's been very active in the chat tonight. So congrats, Mr. or Ms. Nordic. Email me with your deets and we will get that information to the fine folks over at Word Diary Magazine. So congratulations to Nordic Maelstrom for being the winner this evening. Now we're actually not, and I put this here in the order for this reason, because we are now going to start to encounter the Crimean war games that people have actually heard of. The first of which is part of the Art of Siege. And the Crimean War siege in here is, in fact, the Siege of Sevastopol, which lasted for like 10 or 11 months before it fell to a really well-fortified Russian position. I almost said Soviets. I often say Soviet slips out when I mean Russians, and Russian slips out when I mean Soviets. And I blame Squad Leader for that, to be honest. Not yet. Not yet. We're going to eventually have the ability to do basically the entire East Front. So eventually, and we'll be doing some content on that direction in the Operational Combat series. And that's happening. Jeff Beeler says rebuilding the game room after having to empty all the bookshelves in order to get a free carpet. Hey, free carpet. I'm going to put some carpet out here probably soon, actually. And it's going to be that like super cheap indoor outdoor stuff that you get from Lowe's. It's like $20 for like a 6 by, I don't know, 12, 6 by 10 roll or something like that. That'll basically fit perfectly. 3 of those will basically fit perfectly in that room. And it will make the room feel cozier, and it will be slightly less echoey. Now, you may have seen or heard a significant echo in recent unboxing videos. So Art of Siege, SPI Classic. I'm not sure who designed the Sevastopol module specifically, but if we go to that page, we will see that Rob Mosca designed it. So Redmond Simonson graphic design here. This is it actually. There we go. There we go. So this is it's a pretty highly sought after SPI soapbox. I don't believe this ever. Did I say Korean again? Did I say Korean again? Well, I'm going to drink anyway, so just in case. Andrew Ray can play Empires and Arms in a garage. It totally does work. It's just you probably don't have air conditioning or heat in your garage, and that can be an issue. So in any event, Art of Siege is one of the more highly sought after SPI soapboxes. It is what's BGG want for it? It's not that well. BGG wants really high money for it. Noble Knight wants 120-150. So what is this thing? Friggin' wrecked or what? No, not really. 148.50 for a near VG NM Art of Siege? I mean, I know it's on sale, but that's pretty good. So check out Noble Knight if you're interested in a copy of Art of Siege. Hell, I'm tempted. If I wasn't broke, I would be tempted to buy that. I got to prepare for Origins as well as On to Richmond 2, which is a $200 game. So, but any event, Sevastopol here, Siege of Sevastopol. So this is one of the rare Crimean War things that isn't Balaclava, Inkerman, or the Alma. So, um, so moving on from that, and there's a pretty good price on it right now. So Alma 1854, designed by Laurent Martin and published by Vevictus. The magazine, the cover pictured here is obviously a Vevictus cover. And it says there's a Serigo Editions version 2, but it doesn't actually say that. Company based in France. Oh, so apparently that's the publisher of Vevictus magazine. Why is that listed separately here then? That's weird. Okay. In any event, I do have this is a 2016 game, so it's another one of these where these are totally mounted counters. So apparently we're 2016 and maybe 2014 or 2012 are past the point where Vevictus was not yet mounting their counters. Generally, I've really only looked at a couple of these games, but generally the ones I've seen look pretty good. The magazine is, of course, in French, and buying a French magazine with French articles is probably not something I'm going to do. Okay, Nordic Maelstrom. I'll talk about this. It says the only $200+ game that they would think about buying is the Library of Battles box that deals with the 1809 Danube campaign with Wagram and Asper Nestling. That is the coming storm. And don't pay $200 for it, because Kevin Zucker has assured us that that is that a new edition of that is in fact in the pipeline. Yes, that's correct. The other one that's sort of fell out, it was a very early entry in the series, was Four Lost Battles, and they've already redone that. I'm not exactly sure what Kevin's doing to keep that stuff available, but generally once they come into print, they stay available. I know some of those components are printed in-house, but certainly the maps and the counters are not. So yeah, wait on the coming storm. You can, if you are interested in it for like topical reasons, try and run down a copy of Kevin Zucker's game 1809 from Victory Games. That is an operational level game, so it's very different scale, but it covers the entire Danube campaign of 1809. And it looks pretty good. Callendale did some video on it. He had some unpleasant things to say about it, and it's got a weird map configuration where it's 3 maps, short end to short end. One is not a full map, I think. But oh, I meant to mention this. Yes. So I think it's Epic History TV. It's not Epic History TV. It's one of the history channels on YouTube. If you search for Crimean War, Last Crusade, or First Modern War, you will get a pretty good video on the Crimean War. So I actually watched that in preparation for this show, and it is very. And I meant to mention it. And what are we arguing about here? Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. Anyway, we will, for those who missed out on the giveaways, bear in mind we will have 2 more next week and 2 more the week after that. So there's all that stuff. I love the Library of Napoleonic Battles. I think it's a great system. It's easy to play. It's not like crazy detailed. It's at a level of detail appropriate for its scale, and the maps and counters are very attractive. So, and I really like the maps actually. Moving on from Alma 1854 from Vevictus. Empires at War. This was mentioned by somebody, a thread in the chat. This is a Joe Miranda game, and do I still have this? It's possible I still have this. It's possible I don't, but it's possible I still have this. So this is 19th century battles, of which one is Crimean War, and that's Inkerman. The other is Solferino, which is a Risorgimento battle. There's also Königgrätz, which is Franco-Prussian War, and Gravelotte, Saint Privat, which is also Franco-Prussian War. So this is, I have handled this. I owned this at one point. I may even still have it. And it has Decision Games art style that is typical of the period, which is to say, I do not like these counters. Now, on the upside, I am sure this on the collector's market goes for relatively inexpensive change, and the map is not too bad. So certainly not a graphical masterpiece, but there's nothing really wrong with it either. It is in that period when Decision was trying to do quad games a lot like SPI, and they never really that was never really successfully the marketing that stuck, right? Um, and Joe Miranda's, to be fair, Joe Miranda has done a ton on a ton of different topics, but he has done a lot of 19th, 17th, 18th, 19th century stuff. Kind of a lot. So if you're interested in, um, hell, a best of Joe Miranda series might be a good topic for a show. Somebody remind me about that at some point. Because I think Joe Miranda is actually, sometimes his stuff gets rushed, but I think that's a function of the publisher for the most part. Oh, this is correct. This is correct. The last success is the 1809 game. I haven't heard that that's one they're redoing. The Coming Storm is the one with Eilau and Friedland, and Jena Auerstadt for that matter. Your stacking limit is quite correct on that. Nevertheless, we might see a new version of the last success, and it is, if you kind of just judge those volumes by the content of battles that you've heard of, then the kind of the most obvious ones to try to get would be Napoleon's Last Gamble with the 4 battles of, or 5 actually, of battles of the 100 Days. The Last Success, which has Aspern-Essling and Wagram, and the Coming Storm, which has Jena Auerstadt, Eylau, and Friedland, all of which are interesting and very important battles. I'm not sure any of the other sets can match those just in terms of volume of big, important, well-known battles. Um, so let me make some inquiries on this. So stay tuned. Stay tuned on a future show, and we might have a conversation about this, because oddly enough, I feel like we're going to be talking about Napoleonics more than before. All right, next up is Alma, the First Battle. This is by J. Matisse Enzer. And this is one of the games in the Crimean War Cloud, which we will talk about in a moment. So this is a Joe Miranda game that I would like to get. This is the Crimean War, and it's a Joe Miranda S&T game. But check this out. It's not a tactical game. This is the only non-tactical game that we have seen in this entire list. And I think Joe Miranda has done some pretty good work in strategio operational scales. So, in fact, I would say that much of my favorite Joe Miranda work is at those, more higher than tactical scales. If we look at the counters look reasonably decent. The map, I believe, is a Joe Youst map, and it looks like a Joe Youst map and looks pretty good. So I'm actually super interested in seeing this thing. Real Time History is the channel I was talking about with that excellent Korean War video, and it's like 50 minutes long or something like that. This is not particularly rarefied, but it isn't incredibly cheap either. There's 4 copies on BGG right now, one of which is an LN at $30. So that's not bad. Assuming like new is an accurate assessment of its condition. Actually, there's 2 for $30. So this is actually, I think, on my wish list for BGG. So the game looks actually intriguing. And like I said, it's a game about the Crimean War. I caught myself. That is not a tactical game about one of the same 3 battles that we've seen 2 million times. So there's that. Next up, and the next to penultimate game is, I think, the fairly well-known Frank Chadwick Battle of the Alma from Game Designers Workshop from 1978. Graphically, I think we'll find that this is not incredibly great looking. Even by the standards of 1978 Game Designers Workshop. I think the Europa stuff of this period looks better than this, for example. But It's a Frank Chadwick design. It's reasonably well regarded, and we can see that we are now into the Crimean War games that actually have ratings. So not that this number means anything at all, but this is a Series 120 game also, which the conceit there was that I think the idea was you're supposed to be able to play it in 120 minutes or less. So that in and of itself, once again, we're getting into that. There's no simple war games. We need simple war games. Well, here's one from 1978. And for that matter, three of the other ones are coming back out from other Series 120 games. The World War II ones are coming back out from Compass in the not too far distant future. So Nordic Maelstrom has gamed with Frank Chadwick. I've met Frank and talked to Frank, but that's basically it. I have a pretty high opinion of Frank as a designer too. So there's that. Oh yeah, Jeff Anderson says the Konigratz is in fact Austro-Prussian, which is quite right. It is Austro-Prussian and not Franco-Prussian. But they're pretty close together time-wise too, so there's it's easy to just eyeball the date and screw that up. So first major battle of the Crimean War. Caught myself once again, but I'm going to take a drink anyway because we need to finish this fine scotch. And I notice that they spell Sevastopol with a B, so it's Sebastopol. I wonder if that's a British thing or something like that. But pretty interesting lineage on this thing. So, and game's fairly well regarded for a game of its age. That's a good point. Jeff Beeler says that Beta Fam, which was another Series 120 game, has already had a designer's edition publication, but that is from Consim Press and not Compass. So I'm not sure that. Well, it's a new edition in either case. All right. Yeah. See, we took 2 hours. Granted, we talked a lot about Gettysburg too, but all right. Next up is Crimea, another Frank Chadwick game. Is this a? So this is not a miniatures game. This is one that I look at and say, oh, it's obviously a miniatures game. But we're also looking at what appears to be an operational game here, which is also fairly interesting, I might add. But there are insets which then kind of make me think that there's a tactical element to it as well. So I don't really know a lot about this. This says Grand Tactical. From the landings through the fall of Sevastopol, but they spelled Sevastopol with a V here, so I'm not sure what's up with that. And counters, which I think look a little more typical of GDW counters of the era, but these are weird too because these have center nibs, and none of the GDW games I've ever had from this period have center nibs, but this one did. Apparently, at least this one counter sheet. So remember that back in the day, and I mean the 70s and early 80s here, there was a little more ability of publishers to keep stuff in print because they wouldn't be taxed on stuff because they spent the money, right? And it's just products sitting in the warehouse. Nowadays, they get taxed on that. So nobody keeps games in print anymore. It was a lot harder to tell individual printings back in the day unless it is specifically said such and such a printing, right? And a lot of these publishers did not. I also despise center nibs. So interesting looking game. This looks like a Europa map, to be honest about it. So there's this thing. I'm not sure that this really qualifies as area movement, but that's not there. John Longshore, of course, looked it up in Cyrillic, so thank you, John, for doing that. But I see hex maps here and not an area map. I wouldn't consider this an area map. This is lines of communication. I think that works differently. Is this another? This is pre-series 120. I believe. Yeah, 1975. The series 120 games were all in little boxes, and at least a couple of them were also available in Ziplocs. So the person who took the picture here may have had a Ziploc version. I don't know because I don't see a box. I don't see a box at all here. There may or may not have been a box. So, all right, and last, and the game that should be last, meaning the game that should be first, is the Crimean War Quad from SPI, designed by a variety of folks, but the person that I think it was designed by a variety of folks, but the person credited here is Stephen Ross. Redmond Simonson design. This graphic design, not the art as such, But this graphic design, I think, still holds up fairly well today. This is highly playable. There is a flat version of this and a boxed version of this. And one thing that a lot of folks don't necessarily know is SPI sold Ziploc versions of their games too. So there are Ziploc versions of this thing floating around, but they tend to be hard to, you don't see them very often because a lot of times what would happen is there'd be an extra SPI flat tray laying around, and the Ziploc version would get stuffed in that tray. So there's four battles here. The three that we've seen many, many, many times: the Alma, Inkerman, and Balaclava, as well as Chernaya. So there's at least you got kind of all the coverage of the Korean War at a tactical level that you would want here. And I do think it's a really well designed cover too. I will absolutely cop to that. Need water. And presumably this is a period or historic piece of art on the cover, but it's a nice cover. And this is another one that, do I have it on my wish list? If not, I should. I'd love to have this, to be fair. And here we can see the two battles that Decision Games redid. Do we have a re-implemented by? We don't. But this is the S&T magazine that has, doesn't say on the cover, but it's two battles from the Crimean War. Did I say Korean War again? I don't think so. Eric from Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles. Check out his stream starting in like 4 minutes. Well, he says 10 minutes. Over at his channel where they are continuing to play Labatide Austerlitz. So that I did get to watch some of that last week. So it's a very interesting situation to game out too. Plus, it's a great battle. Jeff Beeler, this is not the only coverage of Chernaya River. We did one other game toward the beginning of the list of an unranked game on this battle. But other than like those two, those are the only ones that I'm aware of. So that's not a lot of coverage. Even in magazine games, we have not seen a lot of Crimean War coverage, even though, like we talked about near the top of the show, this is a really kind of important conflict, right? This is a somewhat formative 19th century conflict that we have seen very limited traffic on in board war games. There's been some more traffic in the miniature space, but in the miniature space, you're almost all exclusively talking in miniatures in general, exclusively talking about tactical engagements. There are very few operational miniatures war games. There aren't zero, but there are very few. The import of this conflict, it makes it a little weird that we haven't seen more on it. I mean, it's an interesting conflict. It wasn't a blowout by any means. The British and French, for example, are projecting force to the Crimea, literally, across a quarter of the planet. Maybe not literally, but it's a long way away, right? And they're shipping guys in. The Piedmont Sardinia is involved. The Greeks are actually involved somehow. I have not read anything about that. And somebody else is in favor of on the quote unquote allied side of the British and French as well, and I forget who that is. But the four battles that we hear about, I guess 5. So we have seen one game on the entire conflict, and that's it, the Joe Miranda S&T game. And we have seen a decent number of games on 5 battles. The Alma, well, at least a couple games on 5 battles. We've seen a bunch on Alma and Inkerman and Balaclava. We've seen 2 on Chernaya and 1 on Sevast, the Siege of Sevastopol. And that's an Art of Siege game. It's a siege game, right? So that by itself makes it look interesting. So we did talk for probably 5 minutes about Traveler and/or 2300, and probably blew about 20 on American Civil War. But otherwise, we did pretty good at sticking to the topic here tonight. So, what do we got coming up this week in the last 2 minutes of the show? We do have the show with Dan tomorrow, which is about wargame accessibility. Our special guest will be Mitchell Land, designer of the Next War series from GMT. On Wednesday, I don't have a Traveler Tuesday video this week. I apologize about that. I just didn't get it. It's got to get done over the weekend, and I just didn't get it done over the weekend. There should be an unboxing on Thursday, but I also have a component overview and with some rules discussion of Europa Universalis: The Price of Power, and that's like a 45-minute video. It's coming out on Wednesday. So if you're curious about that game, and I frankly think that most wargamers ought to give that game a look, except that it's sold out. Sorry about that. You can still get the standard edition, but the deluxe edition, I believe, is sold out at the publisher. I imagine that will get redone, and I'm very impressed with what I see. So check that video out. We'll be dealing with that, and then next week we will be back here with another topic that I will decide probably over the weekend, and then we will give some more War Diary magazines away. So I would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. If you have not already, please do subscribe to the channel. Please do thumbs up the video. It really helps the channel. If you'd like to do more to help support the channel, and bear in mind that you are in fact supporting the channel just by being here and contributing to the conversation and participating in the community. So thank you for doing that. If you want to do more, throw me a few dollars, which I could really use right now. The best way to do that is through the Patreon. There is a link to the Patreon in the video description, as well as the Ko-Fi and the all the other stuff. So and the merch store. There's cool merch too. So check that out. I successfully dominated the t-shirt scene at Buckeye Game Fest, I am happy to say. Thoroughly burying the Player's Aid in Ardwulf's Lair t-shirts. Even they got some Ardwulf's Lair t-shirts. So I did that by bringing a giant pile of t-shirts to give away, to be fair. But that was a total victory, a moral victory for me. So once again, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I appreciate it very much. And we'll see y'all again soon.